This episode is dedicated to the memory of Taylor McGee. Follow Black Disability Collective on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So, I did it. I finally went back to the movie theater.
Okay. So, I saw you reviewed this on Letterboxd, and you're Mr.
Yeah.
It's a tale of two podcast co-hosts, Will. I'm Mr. I see something in the movie theater, it adds an extra star. I'll see pretty much anything in a movie theater. I'm itching to get back. I want to see Challengers. I want to see Civil War. I want to see the Monkey movie. There's a ton of stuff I want to see right now. You, on the other hand, I think you kind of detest the movie theater experience. Anytime we've talked about it, it's something that you try to avoid. And I look on Letterboxd, because I try to keep up with what you're watching. And I see a little movie that I know is back in theaters. And I'm like, no, there's no way Will went to a movie theater to see this. Surely, it's back in the zeitgeist. Will didn't want to be left out, so you watched it at home by some means. But no, you went to the movie theater to go see The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Andrew Garfield?
Yeah, and even better, I already own that movie on DVD.
That's crazy. Okay, wow. Well, I'm glad we brought this up, Will, because I'm pretty mystified, man. I know you, I would say, just as well as anyone. It's not often that you have a weekly conversation with somebody.
True. Yeah.
What prompted this?
I literally put it in my friends, my close friends Discord that I have. So 10 years ago, my group of friends and I went to go see this because we thought it was going to be good. We were into it. We're Marvel fans. We're comic book movie fans. We went to go see it, and it became apparent very quickly that not only was this not good, but it was the best kind of not good. It was so entertainingly terrible, and we had 2.5 hours of a blast watching it. And to this day, it's one of my favorite bad movies. It's not good, but I can't lie that I get I wouldn't say I get 2 hours of enjoyment out of that 2 hours and 20-minute movie. It's hilarious for various reasons. I don't want to rehash all of my points here. You can follow me on Letterboxd if you want to read the whole review. It's also, I posted it to my Twitter. But yeah, I put that in I put the link. There's a local Twitter account that I follow that's keeps on top of specialty screenings and stuff like that. And they've been doing specialty screenings a lot more. So Spider-Man 2 was out recently, and that did really well at the box office.
A far superior movie.
100%.
I'm not the biggest Marvel, I'm not the biggest superhero guy, but I'm a Spider-Man 1 man myself. I like that movie.
And that was out recently, and I think that they put Amazing Spider-Man 2 in for 10th anniversary because it came out in 2014. And so I put that in. I was just like, hey, if anybody wants to go see this in the theaters again, I don't know if I would go that far. And then a couple of my friends were like, no, actually, do you want to go see it? And I'm like, well, it's on a Monday in the evening. I don't have anything else going on. So sure. So I bust downtown and I went to go see it with a couple of the friends that I saw it with in 2014. And we had a hoot. And you know what? Surprisingly better attended than I thought it would be. There was even a couple of spidered men in costumes.
Yeah, I think some people are they're going to because it's the whole franchise is back in theaters. And so I think some people are, I assume, just ticking off the box. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, I've never actually seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Everything I've seen from that movie makes it seem kind of repellent to me. But you're selling me on it. I've always been a big proponent of, I'm not a believer, especially in cinema, I'm not a believer of the guilty pleasure. I think pleasure is as pleasure does. I've often said that the worst thing a movie could do is bore me or insult my intelligence. If a movie is making me laugh, I don't care if it's intentional or not. If the movie is providing entertainment, that is a huge success in my mind. So I always look at things with that framework. And so you're selling me on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, I have, my other big laundry list of stuff I gotta go see, so that's pretty far down, but perhaps, Will, someday I'll borrow your DVD copy.
I would happily loan it out to you. Conversely to you, I grew up Catholic, so I'm familiar with guilt, pleasure, and guilty pleasure. So that's very much how I live my life. But I had to keep it 100 on the letterbox and being like, I still enjoy this, and I do think that there's legitimate good things about the way that the production of it. So I gave it a 3 and a heart, which is like, I think a lot more than the reviews you'll see on there. And I'm not out here trying to say that like it's a misunderstood masterpiece or something. I just get a lot of joy from it. So I was very happy to do that. I will say the theater experience, I'm still not a huge fan of it, especially now that we've instituted assigned seating. That ended up creating a little bit of a confusion between my friends and I who had arrived at different times. I don't like that, and I don't know.
That goes to show how long it's been since you've been at a movie theater. I mean, I can't remember when it wasn't assigned seating. It's definitely even before the pandemic, I feel like it was all assigned seating, so it's been a minute now. And this biker gang agrees with me that's driving by right now. I got the windows open. It's a beautiful day, Will. Not a day to go see Spider-Man. This is a day to be outside.
No.
And I was glad, this episode of Arthur we're going to talk about this week, kind of a gardening adjacent episode, and art imitates life. I was outside. It's not gardening, but I repotted a bunch of my house plants. I made use of this kind of first sunny day here in Nova Scotia, and I was happy. I was like, time to go back inside and watch Arthur. Just kidding. I always relish the opportunity. But I was happy that kind of Arthur was matching the vibe. It would kind of be a bummer if this was like, oh, and there's a blizzard in Elwood City.
Right. Well, and you've been doing the apartment living thing for quite a while, and I don't think, you and I, who have been living in apartments for many, many years, have never had much of an ability to do any sort of gardening thing. Do you think that could be something that if you had the opportunity to, like if you had the living space that would allow for a real gardening effort, is that something that you think that you could get into?
Well, I mean, the indoor plants thing, I've only been doing it for a couple years, but I've really grown to love it. It's one of the, it's one of the simple joys of my life, is growing these here indoor plants. My grandfather on the Italian side was a aggressive gardener. I would say that was his passion in retirement, and he had this massive, really beautiful garden out in Cape Breton, and those are big shoes to fill. My girlfriend's got a house, and she has a little bit of a garden that we're planning on working on this weekend. And my parents, it's funny, I was pretty resistant to it because my parents always had a garden, and I always resented. I wanted to stay inside and play video games. I always resented having to help them with the garden growing up.
Right.
But it's definitely something that I'd be interested in, just because I'm having so much fun with these indoor plants, and I feel like having a garden, Will, you could grow your own tomatoes, grow your own cucumber. I like tomatoes. I like cucumber. That'd be great.
My dad used to do the same thing in our back garden as well, and I never really appreciated it either. But you never know. Hopefully we have plenty of life left to appreciate that. Welcome, everybody, to Elwood City Limits. This is, in fact, the Episodic Arthur podcast. My name's Will Young with Lucas Mancini. Just talking here about Spider-Man and gardening, as we like to do. And we also like to hear from you, listeners. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com is where you can send us email. We have a couple here that I wanted to get to before we get the show truly started. Our first one comes from Nora, who I believe is emailing us for the first time. Hey, Will and Lucas. I know you guys are super into wrestling and anime, so I've been wondering if you guys are going to check out the new Kinnikuman anime coming out this July. It's not just another series, it's the seminal shonen foundation that the greats have taken after. We'd still have your Naruto's, One Piece, and such without Dragon Ball, because those authors cited Kinnikuman as a big influence on them just as much. Heck, the turn from gag-focused to battle manga, like in Dragon Ball, is owed to Kinnikuman, which is a direction the author of Yu Yu Hakusho took. Even the author of Full Metal Alchemist said they owed their career to Kinnikuman. I like the series because it and Dragon Ball both feel like they're cut from the same cloth. I started when I watched the 2000s anime, retitled for Western audiences as Ultimate Muscle. Before that, the West only knew about it through the Muscle NES game and the collectible figurines called MUSCLE. But the lore was censored and changed. I'm hoping with the new series, it will lead to a better understanding and wider appreciation, as well as you guys appreciating it similar to Dragon Ball. And I did check this out. I wasn't aware of this until Nora sent this email. So there is a new anime coming in July. Yep. It's called Kinnikuman Kanpeki Chojin Shisho Hen.
And before people email us, I have to correct you, Will. I think it's Kinnikuman. Before we really? Sound like a parent being like Pokemans. At least that's how they say it in the Japanese opening of the original series. They sing a little song, and it's Kinnikuman, which is Japanese. One of those words is Japanese for muscle. I think it's muscle man, Kinnikuman.
I think I got that pronunciation from Ultimate Muscle, so I shouldn't be taking that. I shouldn't be taking that as gospel. I just got used to saying it. So Kinnikuman, okay,
right. And on that note, I had seen Ultimate Muscle growing up. It's not like it was my favorite thing. I didn't get into wrestling till I was older. I probably would love it now. And I've always been curious about the original show, especially because it often seems to have characters that are inspired by real life wrestlers. Like there's like a fake Stan Hansen and a fake Ric Flair and a fake Terry Funk and a fake NWO, and that was always really interesting to me is how do these real life wrestlers, how are they represented in this wrestling anime? So I am curious about the new show. As far as new anime is concerned, I am really, really picky. More often than not, I find myself not liking that stuff because I'm more of I like the look of the retro stuff. However, I'm reading now it is made by Production IG, who is they are a studio that I trust. So I will definitely give it the old 3-episode rule. What about yourself, Will?
I think it definitely would be something that I'd be interested in watching a little bit of, because I was a huge fan of Ultimate Muscle when I was younger. It came about a year or so before I started watching wrestling for real, and everything that I liked about Ultimate Muscle turned out to be everything I like about professional wrestling. I was totally into it. It hit me at just the right time. They just released like a new Blu-ray of Ultimate Muscle, and I really, really want to get it. Hopefully I will be able to. And I would love to give this a try. I don't have experience with the Kinnikuman manga or anime before it. I do know that it is it's not as action-based as Ultimate Muscle. It is very gag-focused. This is from like secondary sources. I think it's fairly gag focused in a way, but as Nora's email says, there could be a transition from gag to more serious shonen anime. So I don't know. Like I really haven't seen it. I'm not sure even where to, but I will try and track down this new one coming out in July because hey, it's about wrestling. I love wrestling, so why wouldn't I try it? But Nora, thanks a lot for bringing that to our attention. That's on the heels of our ECL Origins episode about Dragon Ball. And it's true, I think we were very quick to talk about how influential Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball are and have been, but certainly there are a lot of other seminal works in anime and manga that a lot of creators draw on that are even older than your Dragon Ball. And our second email comes from Ashley Hollingsworth. Hey, Will and Lucas. I feel so vindicated by the Hall Minotaur, because I previously sent in an email talking about my disdain for Miss Tingley and how she just seems mean, and this episode proved me right. She's a stick in the mud who seems to dislike children and just wants to enforce dumb rules. She's someone who sucks the joy out of life. Again, she reminds me of the school administrators who found any excuse to get kids into trouble just to exert their authority. I'm glad she seemingly had an attitude shift near the end of the episode. Hopefully she won't revert back to her fuddy-duddy mean self if she makes any more appearances. In terms of hall monitors, we never had one in the schools I went to. At most, we would get a hall pass, which was usually something bulky and weird, like a ruler or an eraser, which we would present if we ran into a teacher or security. As for my thoughts on Season 20 overall, not bad. I wasn't familiar with any of the episodes and was surprised by how many I actually enjoyed. Glad to see that Arthur still has some fun stories for us in its twilight years. As an old head, it can be hard to think there's anything worthwhile past the first few seasons. Season 21 off to a pretty good start as well. Rewatching the entire series is something I've been wanting to do for a while, so I'm happy the podcast gives me an excuse to do so. Now I just have to make my way through the many specials I missed. The only ones I've watched so far is The Rhythm and Roots of Arthur, and it was a special, all right. And hey, Ashley, don't forget, we have commentaries for almost all of those specials, and they are available for free now if you go on over to our YouTube channel, or you can find them on the free feed, syncable commentary tracks that you can watch along with those specials. Really looking forward to your For the Kids episode on Blue's Clues. I watched Blue's Clues well into my early teen years. I even watched it in Spanish. It's called Pistas de Blue. There was a time when my mom and I didn't have cable, but Telemundo would air Spanish versions of Nickelodeon shows like Blue's Clues and Rugrats. I knew I'd reached the point I was too old to be watching Blue's Clues when I started yelling at Steve for not understanding what Blue wanted. Yet, I still got choked up when he left for college. As nice as Joe was, the show was never the same. And just because I mentioned the show, the theme song is now stuck in my head. As Steve would say, thanks for doing your part. You sure look smart. Well, thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Nora, for your emails. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com. And yeah, we just kind of went through everything that has been and will be going on our Patreon. Patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. The ECL Origins episode where we talk about Dragon Ball is now available for patrons, a good hour-long podcast there. And at the end of May, we'll be doing our podcast about Blue's Clues for our sister podcast For the Kids. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to researching that one, as I do for most of the shows that we talk about on that show. And you can get the full thing if you sign up at Patreon, just like some of the people whose names I'm going to read right now. People who have signed up for the Patreon, cool people, include Stella and Christine Wong, Sierra S. and Michaela Gibson, Matt and Andrew Power. Check out Andrew Power's webcomic, by the way. Allison Archambault and Robert Morrison, Kelly Corbett and Aurora Borealis. Hey, speaking of which, that's a little bit topical. I'm guessing, not to completely interrupt these, but Lucas, did you see the Aurora Borealis?
I tried. It was a cloudy day. I tried my might. I had friends who were in these Aurora Borealis spotter Facebook groups, and they had apps, and it was all for naught.
No, I didn't even know what was going on until it was over. RPG Fiend and Emma, thank you to Alicia and Thunder Yetta. Thank you to Iman Salehian and Stanley Fryman. Thank you to Young Wee and to KPX_1. Patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits for all that extra stuff, including Discord access, getting your name mentioned on the show, and all sorts of content. One last thing before we start the episode, just so I don't forget to say this, I just randomly happened upon this, and of course, as we mentioned before, Ashley is a moderator at the Arthur subreddit. You can check that out right now. There's a Q&A going on with one of the Arthur storyboard supervisors, Peter Huggan, and he's got some interesting answers to questions. It's like, we're not affiliated with the Arthur Reddit unless they want us to be. Ditto for the Arthur Wiki. But yeah, figured Arthur fans, you should check that out. r/Arthur. And today it is the double episode of Season 21. It is called The Master Builders. Now, Lucas, this episode has a little break in the middle. And I wondered, what do you think makes more sense? I wrote my notes down for as I was watching the episode, but it separates pretty cleanly into two narratives. Should we do it as it appears on the episode and go back and forth, or should we do one storyline completely and then the other storyline completely?
Let's just do the whole shebang, because I feel like if you look at them, I was thinking this as I was looking over my notes. If you look at them as standalone episodes, the kind of climax of episode 1 is pretty poor. So I'd prefer to keep them in mind as 2 parts, though we will talk about the Word of Us kids in the middle. So why don't we just hold off on our final thoughts until we get through the whole both of them?
Sure. All right. So we start off here. Muffy, in this prospective future, is the president of Skywire Industries. She's still 8 years old, but she is the president of Skywire Industries, which is represented by a towering skyscraper. But this is not kosher with Francine. No pun intended. Francine argues that it's actually her company. And there's another argument going on here where Buster and George are pitching a new invention called the Skywire Dog Ship, which is an inflatable doghouse. But Buster and George argue that each of them is the original inventor of Skywire Industries, and this provokes a big 4-way argument between all of them. The only other thing I wanted to note here is that I think Buster is dressed like a character from Grand Theft Auto.
I didn't even notice that. That's an apt comparison, though.
He's got that really cheesy blazer on, and he seems like he's kind of up to no good. So it was giving me that kind of like seedy vibe. So this episode, as I said, we have 2 storylines that we're following. One concerning Buster and George, and the other concerning Muffy and Francine, and we'll go back and forth between them. So to start off the Buster one, we see Mr. Langley here. Now, Lucas, did you remember Mr. Langley? Fritz? Colonel Langley, as he's called?
Of course I remembered Colonel Langley, and this was a welcome return. I feel like, him and Buster's dynamic is something unique for the Buster character to do, and so I was glad we were kind of bringing this back, and he wasn't gone forever.
So yeah, in case you don't remember, one of the things about Buster's character in the later seasons is that he tends to a community garden, and that community garden was the guardianship of it was bestowed upon him by a guy named Colonel Langley, Fritz Langley, who is just an older fella that Buster takes a shine to and takes a shine to Buster. So they are having lunch together, and Buster's having a bit of trouble with cabbage butterflies that are appearing on the cabbage leaves in the garden, first as caterpillars and then as butterflies. And Mr. Langley says that he's run into these before. In fact, we have this flashback sequence that is reminiscent of a Vietnam War movie, because Ride of the Valkyries is playing while Mr. Langley some years ago tried to get rid of the cabbage butterflies to no avail.
I love that the Apocalypse Now reference point.
But what actually got rid of them, despite Mr. Langley's best efforts, was luring birds called purple martins over to the garden. So they decide that to do this, they've got to create a birdhouse that will attract these purple martins to the garden. They will eat the cabbage butterflies, and that will solve the problem. Then, in the other story, Muffy starts out by giving Francine this kind of ugly bracelet as a birthday present, a before your birthday present, as Muffy calls it, because it's not actually Francine's birthday. She just wants somebody else to have the same bracelet so they can match. So kind of ugly. Francine's not really into it. Nemo loves it, though. We see a lot of Nemo in this episode, and he's not speaking. Unfortunately, his voice actor passed away, but this is just regular cat Nemo. He loves this thing. And this gets Muffy to thinking a little bit. She had been reading Mini Mogul magazine and talks about the cover star, whose name is Buck Benders, who ended up making a fortune by creating dog toys. Which, so if you're a dog person in Elwood City, do dog toys work on you? If they gave a cat toy to Sue Ellen, would that work?
Probably not, right? As we've talked about before, the funny animals, which is to say the animals, and not to get into the animal hierarchy, folks. You get your Elwood City Limits bingo card. But, the animals that wear clothes and stand upright, their animal traits don't really come up with the exception of Buster's ears and George's antlers. Besides that, they barely acknowledge that they're different species, or they just kind of refer to themselves as people. And it's not like, if there's a pig, he's got super pig smelling senses, or
right.
Arthur doesn't have any sort of aardvark-based powers. So I don't think these kids are... Now, they did, and this was one throwaway thing in season 1, and I always think about it, the ducks like being outside in the rain. Which is informed by their animal traits, but I also think that's the only time we've ever seen the ducks is for that one throwaway gag.
Yeah, that feels like a little bit of a retcon, too, of like something they were trying in literally the first year of the show, and then we're like, don't really like that idea. So, yeah, I don't hold them fast to that one. So, with Nemo enjoying this so much, Muffy thinks that they may have stumbled on a new hot cat toy that they can market, so they decide to try and make something out of this. So Mr. Langley and Buster end up building the birdhouse. It looks really nice, and Mr. Langley asks Buster to install 4 bolts into the base so that it can just stand rigid and not be knocked over. Buster goes home to get a tool, like a winch, to screw them in, but he gets distracted and he doesn't end up doing it, and unfortunately the birdhouse is destroyed during an overnight storm off screen. All I have to say about this Buster behavior is ADHD. ADHD. As soon as like he got distracted by a phone call to Arthur, and I don't say that to make fun. It's like that happens to me all the time because I deal with that myself. And just like if I don't keep focus on something, I can like forget about it in a way that like I never believe that I can forget about it so quickly and so completely, but I will. So focus is something that I need when I need to like get something done. And so Buster here, that's what he really needed. He needed focus, but unfortunately it was not to be. And Buster is so embarrassed about this. He's afraid that I don't know, he's just kind of afraid that he will lose Fritz's trust, I suppose. He's almost at points he's talking about like getting like sanctioned like by a commanding officer more than just like getting in trouble with an adult.
I did like this kind of like military role play, and they do it both in the writing and like you said that references to Apocalypse Now earlier. Again, it's another funny, unique part of the Fritz Buster dynamic. We have a lot of kind of mentors in Arthur along the way, and that's something unique to this particular dynamic.
Especially Buster, I think, as somebody who doesn't have his dad around a lot, he tends to have a lot more male role models who are not directly related to him. So Buster decides, instead of telling Mr. Langley he's going to build a new birdhouse by himself, he'll figure out some way to do it. Muffy and Francine decide to create Skywire Industries, which is a combination of their names. They almost go with Fran's Cross, which almost sounds like a Kingdom Hearts entry.
Fran's Cross, and then Fran's name would be, if she got Norded, would be X Fran. Fex Ran would be
Ranks Inc. or something.
Ranks F. It's got to still have the F in there, but yeah.
True, yeah.
For those of you listening who don't know what we're talking about, Google Kingdom Hearts Norded.
Yes, there's a lot of Googling to be done with Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah,
so
maybe 3 video essays.
Yeah, have some time on your hands before you do that. And they decide to market this cat toy as the Fruffy, which is another combination of their names. So they go pretty far with this. They mock up a prototype, and they manage to successfully sell it to a local pet store. Now, this pet store owner guy, who this is the first time we've ever seen him, probably the last, he's a little bit not sure about it. He says, the Fruffy, it sounds like a non-dairy dessert topping, which, man, you're getting roasted by the pet store guy? Like, rough start here. But what wins him over is that the pet store has an old fat cat named Potato. And I love Potato. I think Potato is the best.
Yes, Potato is the throwaway character of the week. You know,
Yeah.
Will, often I feel like you're the one to gush over the non-funny animals. You know, you're a big pal guy.
Yep.
And a lot of the times I'm like, I could kind of take or leave them. There's something about Potato. Potato really does it for me. I don't know. I've got the screen paused right now, and I'm just looking at him, and he doesn't. He's making me laugh. He doesn't look like any other character in all of Arthur. Like, I feel like the edges of Arthur characters are always, especially in this era, really sanded down. People look flat. They use minimal lines. There's not a lot of like ugly Arthur characters. Potato is detailed to a fault. You know, he's really overweight. He doesn't look particularly happy. And that's what's endearing about him. Potato is awesome, and I hope he returns. I don't have high hopes that he does, but would that be great?
He's got a similar appeal to, like, you know, like the original design of Garfield, where he's like even more portly and just kind of sedentary.
70s Garfield. I love 70s Garfield.
Yeah, that's what Potato reminds me of. He's just old and rotund and very like comfortable. He's very like happy looking, but he raises a very lethargic paw to like bat at one time. And the pet store owner is like, oh, actually, that means he's really into it. So, yes, I will buy 30 of these by Friday. Muffy also has a great line about Potato. What on earth do you feed him? Other cats? That's like surprisingly a little dark. But I was also thinking, like, so it can't be legal to do this kind of business with two minors here, two 8-year-olds. And the pet store guy offers them a 50-50 split. That definitely isn't fair. Like, you can do that, sure, like, depending on, you know, the issue of them being 8 years old aside, but it's also just, like, a little bit, I don't know. Considering their age, it's a little bit unfair.
I have to defer to the only other reference point I have for this, which is Shark Tank. And I'm to understand that Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, will rinse. It doesn't matter if they're 8 or 14, 7, 3. If you got a business plan, Mr. Wonderful is going to rinse you for 51% of your company if he has the opportunity to do so. Yeah, I know you're not supposed to employ children, but I think children are allowed to run a business. Like, if they start their own business, I think that's actually all on the up and up. And then 50-50 split... I would have to break into their books. I know it's 50-50 profit margin, right?
What?
Like
I don't know.
Like he's offering them like whatever with every sale they get 50% of the sale.
I think so. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's say that.
If that's the case, that's actually I feel like not that bad. Usually the vendor makes I don't know. I actually don't know. I'm talking out of my butt a little bit here, but I don't see. Usually, when children have businesses, they're more of like the non-profit variety. Like I know, like locally, we have like there's like a special like salad dressing, like Hope Blooms. That's like a children's non-profit, but I know that the children are actually like involved in the business.
Okay.
And again, there are kids on Shark Tank, Will, who are getting Mr. Wonderful going. He's a con artist. He's. I don't think it's as duplicitous as one might assume. And I trust. Right. Listen, a friend of Potato is a friend of mine. I trust this guy.
You just said profit margin, and my brain like dumped its cash. Like it's just like that is one of those terms that's like, you want to prove that I'm not actually an adult? Ask me what a profit margin is, because I don't know. So that's where they're at with this. They've got this business deal going ahead.
Income minus costs, Will, is your profit margin. It's income minus cost.
That's a really good way to remember it. I promise you I won't. Like, again, it's like Buster. It's like, unless I focus on profit margin for a day, it's gone. It's just smoke through a keyhole. Meanwhile, Buster tries to create a new birdhouse out of cardboard, but it melts in the rain. Finally, he gets the idea to ask George to make him a new birdhouse. And now, one of the things that I really love usually in older Arthur episodes, but it peaks around every now and then, is when one of the kids makes someone else an offer. And it's like just a bunch of crap that they have around the house. And this is another classic Arthur offer here. So to build a new birdhouse, Buster offers George $7.65, half a salami, a flashlight that works if you shake it, and a pack of mustard for the salami. And George accepts. Like, honestly, there have been worse deals on this show. Like, he didn't offer him a ring that goes hoo when you blow it or something.
George requests the mustard, too.
And Buster
Buster just happened. It's funny that we're getting into the Shark Tank stuff, some negotiation here, because Buster had the mustard all along, but that was the one thing he didn't say he had. And then George was like, "You got any mustard?" And then he has like a packet from a McDonald's or something.
That's his walking around mustard. But he was right. He got that guess absolutely on the money. So yeah, George takes that as an offer, and he's going to make a new birdhouse. Muffy enlists the help of Mr. Crosswire here because they realize that they have to make 30 fruffies by Friday, and they don't know where to start in terms of how to just make 30 more of these. And Mr. Crosswire politely refuses to help Francine and Muffy. He doesn't, he just says that it's something that builds character and will help them more in the long run if it's something they do by themselves. Because Francine and Muffy are asking like for Mr. Crosswire's workforce to do it. Like it's all we're asking for is until Friday, basically, to employ them into a second job. But Mr. Crosswire he remembers when he was young, he used to sell used inline skates. And that was how he got the business acumen that he has today, by kind of toughing it out and finding his own solutions. And we end off the first part of the episode with Muffy and Francine determined to make enough fruffies for Friday's order. They'll figure out a way to do it somehow. And now a word from us kids. I'm loving, Lucas, you've really got me thinking about the links between the Word From Us Kids segments and the episodes before it, and in a way that I never have before. So this one is among the more dubious of them, in that it's Rowan and her second grade class. They're making these pinwheels for their class's garden, and they're all labeled with the various vegetables that they're growing out there, because in the episode that we're watching, they're making things. And now, in class, we're making things.
There's also a garden.
Yes.
In the episode.
And it's not like a community garden. It looks to be like just a bit of a patch of soil that they're growing a few things in, just for a larf, as opposed to like feeding people seriously. I also love to mention lately about the relative youth of the teachers that we are seeing. The teacher here, Miss Ellen, potentially the youngest looking teacher that we've had yet, and I'll tell you why. There's a shot of Miss Ellen. They mentioned like she's the art teacher for the kids who's facilitating this project. Miss Ellen, she's at a table where she's using a hammer. And the first time I was watching this, I was like, oh, one of the kids is using a hammer. And then they cut to the next shot, and it's like Miss Ellen teaching and telling the class something. And I'm like, that woman looks exactly like that kid who is using the hammer. Is that like her daughter or something? And I was like, oh no, that was always the teacher. She just has a very like fresh face about her that if you put her on the same level as the kids, I apparently confused her for one of them.
Hi everybody, it's Lucas, your favorite co-host from Elwood City Limits. I want to remind you folks that if you like listening to the podcast, first and foremost, the best way to spread the love is to tell a friend who is interested in Arthur or podcasts or animation or hearing about Nova Scotia for some reason. But there's some other things you could do as well. For instance, you can follow us on social media. Twitter is @ECL Podcast. The Instagram is at Elwood City Limits. My pet project, the Twitch channel, which we do live streams on sometimes, twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod. And we also have a Facebook and Tumblr as well. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and youtube.com/Elwood City Limits. That's where Will has been diligently uploading all of the episodes if they're not on your podcast listening service of choice. If they aren't on one of those services, let us know. You can reach out to us on social media or via email at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Finally, the Patreon is where you can find all of our paywall content, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. This gives you access to the Discord, where we have a bustling community, as well as some exclusive videos, audio bonuses, such as commentary for the various Arthur movies and more, as well as some of our additional podcasts. For the kids is where me and Will cover all the PBS shows that aren't Arthur, as well as ECL Origins, where we really talk about any show from our childhood that we want. And most importantly, you get early access to every episode of ECL. You get to flex on your friends that you're getting it a week early. You can join for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And now, back to the show.
And now, back to Arthur.
But let's move on to the second part of the episode. We start off, this definitely has cold open energy, even though the episode is already going on. Buster has a dream where he is in what looks to be a large vegetable patch. There's a weird frame where Buster takes a bite out of a big carrot and his teeth look crazy. But it turns out he is actually shrunk down to be in a normal garden. And he encounters Fritz, who is made to look and act like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland, except instead of smoking a hookah, like in the original story and in the Disney movie, Caterpillar Fritz is blowing bubbles.
It's like in SpongeBob, whenever someone's supposed to be smoking, they're blowing bubbles.
Is that really? How have I never noticed that?
There is like bubble blowing, which is its own thing. Like they're not supposed to be smoking then when like Patrick and SpongeBob are blowing fun bubbles. But whenever someone has like a pipe, usually it's like if a detective character has a pipe or whatever, it's always a bubble pipe.
Okay. And then Buster slowly realizes that as they are there in the garden, they're being turned into cabbage butterflies. They're being turned into caterpillars because the cabbage butterflies have infected the cabbage. And eventually, the purple martins will come around and eat them. And Buster wakes up. It doesn't like it ties into what's going on, but it's also just a little bit enough of a separate thing from the rest of the episode to just like this is kind of what's going on, but it also doesn't super relate to everything. But in Buster's story, where we are right now, George, we know this. He's big into carpentry. He's a big builder. He has these grand designs for the birdhouse. But he is looking at more as an art endeavor, and he doesn't want to rush it. Even though Buster wants it done by the end of the week, George is unwilling to compromise his vision. To put it, Buster wants it done by the end of the week, and he's like, I will give you another salami. And George says, I don't want your luncheon meat. I want to make something beautiful. That's their conflict right there.
So this crazy birdhouse that George has made, did it remind you of anything?
Do you mean the one he builds at the end of the episode?
Oh, is that... Okay, never mind. Yes. We'll save this conversation for later, but I wanted to know if you recognized it. Because it certainly reminded me of something.
Okay. I don't think so. So I'm very interested to get there. We'll get there in a little bit. Meanwhile, Muffy has spent a lot of money on resources to build more Fruffies. And in order to at least break even, if not try to make a profit, they have to hike up the Fruffy prices to $22, which Francine is like, yeah, this, like, nobody's going to buy a cat toy that's $22. So Muffy...
Wait, by the way, I was curious, because it's been 5 years since this episode came out. I Googled cat toy.
Yes.
And there was ones available ranging from the price of $7 CAD to $24 CAD.
What?
So I think that Francine is mistaken here.
Well, What is the function of a higher end cat toy that's costing over $20? Like, what's it doing?
Well, one of the ones was like a little bit more involved. It's like buttons come up and the cat presses them down. However, your run-of-the-mill thing hanging from a stick cat toy, the most expensive one I could find of those was around $17. So
whoa,
you could really, I mean, there was ones of those for like $6 as well, but there are bougie cat toys out there.
Okay. I mean, I took Francine's criticism as apt, but I don't own a cat, never have, so I don't know what these could cost. It's like, what? It's a cat toy, Michael. What could it cost? $10? Okay, good to know. I'm glad you did some research on this.
Inflation.
Muffy, yeah, seriously. So yeah, Muffy spent a lot on resources to make this happen. She considers using false advertising so that they market the Fruffy as exclusive, endorsed by an artist like Picatzo. But Francine calls this out as false advertising, and this is a neat way to help kids who are watching the show think about the ways that items in a store are advertised and can potentially be deceptive. I don't think that's the point of this episode. I think it's more of a fun thing, but it is a neat little opportunity to be like, yeah, people can just say stuff in advertisements and it might not be true. And we know that because we know Muffy's lying.
Or it is true and it's designed to hypnotize you. This is the lesson of, Mad Men. Other cigarettes are poison, ours are toasted. That's kind of what Muffy and Francine are talking about here.
Right, exactly. So they're not really sure what to do to make sure that they can actually make the product without spending a bunch of money. And we actually get a little bit here from Catherine. Catherine ends up being the way in for this. So we find out that Catherine she's in high school. She's going to a CTE school, which she explains stands for Career and Technical Education. Do we have those here?
No, that's an American thing. That is definitely, I wrote that down. That is definitely an American thing. We do not have those here.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense.
The closest thing we would have in Canada, and this is interesting to nobody listening, but the closest thing we would have in Canada is like co-op streams. So
yes.
You'd still be in the regular high school, but you'd be doing more of a vocational education via a co-op stream.
Right, which at least when I was in high school, decades ago, not actually, but when I was in high school, you could do co-op if you wanted to. And it sounded like what Catherine's doing is like a high school equivalent of like community college in terms of like getting actual job experience for a more technical career you want to follow, and they do explain this in the show, so I got it. But I was also like, I'm pretty sure that was never an opportunity that I had for myself. Also, get those sneakers off the bed. Speaking of Americans,
yeah, that's American stuff right there.
I know. Ooh, it drives me nuts. But Catherine is, of course, not really interested in helping out Francine and Muffy just to be nice. So Francine offers to do Catherine's chores for 2 months so that they can use the 3D printer at her school. And Catherine eventually agrees. We even get a little, again, it's not meant to be like an educational episode, but we get about a minute of them learning how to use a 3D printer and what it is. And again, it's just another leap in technology that we're experiencing through Arthur. If it's not cell phones or video calls, now it's 3D printing, which this would have been probably around the time that it was starting to get more, like people were starting to find out more about what it was. Like you and I would have seen, I first saw 3D printing in community college, the one that we went to, but it was a little while before I even wrapped my mind around the fact that like, oh yeah, it can just make this stuff from the material you put in it. So it's just an interesting intersection. Again, if you look at where Arthur started to where it is now, the kind of printing we had, you might have been able to get color printing in 1996, and now we're talking about 3D printing.
Yeah, the first time I remember it was, community college, or like the public library has 3D printers.
Ooh.
Which, there's a really good bit in Nirvana, the band The Show, about using the library's 3D printer. So it's definitely if we put ourselves in the mind space of 5 years ago, there's very Arthur's getting ripped from the headlines. You know, they were talking about cereal last season. Now we're talking about 3D printers. It's like a Dick Wolf show or something.
They do end up using this. It works out really well and a lot cheaper than just making it from scratch or buying all the materials. So it looks like they've got their whole output ready to go, and they can even just hand it into the pet store now. Meanwhile, so this is, Lucas, this is what you're talking about. George creates what he calls a bird city, which is this sprawling, complex structure that can barely be moved by George and his dad, and it's not the type of thing that Buster was hoping for, just like a little house type structure that could sit on top of a pole. This is way too big, way too wide, and it's just not what Buster was thinking of. Okay, so what did this make you think of?
It looks like Habitat 67 from the Expo 67, the Montreal World's Fair, and that building still is in Montreal to this day. It was like kind of a marvel. I think it was Japan's entry into the World's Fair, but it was kind of a marvel of architecture where the design was supposed to be an apartment complex where no two people had the same view. But if you Google Habitat 67, it looks just like it. So I wonder if that it's drawing direct inspiration.
Dude, it's got to be, because I'm looking at it right now. I didn't know about this until right now. It's got to be, especially because Arthur's production is like at least half in Montreal. Like there is a there's a Canadian and Montreal contingent.
It's, to my knowledge, a lot of the remnants of Expo 67 are now gone. I mean, the artificial island is still there, and the big globe is still there.
Yeah.
But the Habitat 67, people live in it. It's just like a building you could live in Montreal.
It's great. It's wild looking. Like check it out on Google. Habitat 67. Just get a good gander at it. So Buster, unfortunately, is out of options, and he decides to come clean to Fritz, who does forgive him, although he is a little disappointed. And at this point, they're like the birdhouse. It was kind of a ticking clock because the cabbage continues to get eaten by the cabbage butterflies, and now there's barely any left. So now, instead of creating another birdhouse, they're just going to try to create a new garden. There is also a point here while George is working on the birdhouse where Buster goes to visit him, and he knocks on the door, and Wally answers, and Buster talks with Wally as though George isn't attached to him. So he's like, "Oh, hey, Wally, can George come out?" And George is saying, like, "No, he can't be bothered right now." And God, like, again, Buster's sliding scale of how dumb he is can really go back and forth, and this is it is cute, but it's also just like, oh boy, like I hope he's not being serious. Unfortunately, it ends in a bit of disappointment for Francine and Muffy as well. They get to the pet store with their fruffies, but it turns out that the idea got unwittingly poached by Buck Benders, who is the cover of Mini Mogul magazine, who also just so happened to create cat toys that are pretty much exactly like the Fruffy. And the pet store guy rescinds the offer, and they just spend all that money for nothing. And they do make a point to say that, like, it wasn't that, they didn't meet Buck Benders and he like stole it. He just says, like, yeah, I think it's just a coincidence. I think you thought of the same thing at the same time, which is really strange, but it does happen. So the two groups finally come together. The stories come together at Brains' mom's ice cream shop. They're both moping about the disappointment. Buster has even decided to carry around the last remaining cabbage that is basically just going bad and is filled with cabbage butterfly bites as like a mark of shame. To remember, like, even though he and Fritz are, like, okay, like, he's just going to carry it around as, like, a medal around his neck, essentially.
Yes, as penance.
Yes, penance.
Bringing back that Catholicism we were talking about at the top of the episode.
But Muffy gets an idea that they can 3D print a new birdhouse. And they do so. They create a new birdhouse that manages to attract purple martins, and they get rid of the cabbage butterflies. And we do get a brief callback to the opening where Buster, George, Francine, and Muffy were arguing in Skywire Industries. And they think, like, what is it going to be like when we go into business together? And they think of themselves, and all four of them are arguing. And then Muffy decides that maybe they shouldn't go into business just yet. maybe wait until they're older, which I thought maybe the episode was going to end with that, with like Skywire Industries being a thing going forward, but yeah, I think Muffy's on the money there. Whew, okay, so that's hopefully everybody was able to follow that as we went back and forth from storyline to storyline, but that's how it was laid out in the episode. That's how we talked about it. And now, Lucas, the Master Builders, the double episode of this season, what did you think about it?
It's tricky to formulate my thoughts. This isn't an easy thumbs up, thumb down, because I did enjoy it, as I often enjoy the double episodes.
Right.
I think that when given more time, the writers always kind of rise to the occasion and earn it and make the best of it. Now, I say that, and I do think that I enjoyed this episode's kind of longer length and being able to spend a little bit more time on these kind of intimate moments between two characters. You know, we get Buster and George hanging out, which we don't have to see. Francine and Muffy, I'm happy to return as a duo. You know, I feel like I've complained before about LaDonna getting a lot of the Francine slots lately, and so, you know, I like the original cast being together in this. But you know, Will, it's like, at the end of the day, what is this episode really about? That's kind of the weird thing, is when we get to the end of the episode, I feel like not every episode has to have a moral, but it kind of just, you know, it's resolved. They say, oh, we could use a 3D printer to print a birdhouse. That's kind of it. And it made me wonder, like, okay, what was this all for? You know,
Right.
I feel like I hold the double episodes to a higher standard because those end up being some of the most impactful and insightful and serious Arthur episodes, and they don't have to be that way. You know, it could just be kind of a funny sitcom episode. But I don't know. This episode, I feel like I'm gonna forget pretty quickly. I like all the Fritz stuff. I like Buster and Fritz, and I think that a lot of the stuff with Muffy and Francine's really funny. But I don't know, I can't help but be disappointed that with the runtime, there's not really kind of an overarching message or thing to take away from this episode. So it's not like I was bored. I enjoyed my time with it, but it ended with me feeling a little bit hollow.
I think that's a good point. It would be interesting, and I'm not saying we will do this at some point, but to look at all of the double episodes and kind of figure out like which ones are the not so good ones, which ones are the good ones. And I agree. I think a lot of the double episodes that succeed are often about something more than they're not, I suppose. I take your critique there, that you kind of wonder like what is a bit of the point of this, and it felt like there were instances where maybe we were trying to say something with either the educating people about 3D printing, or just like the whole learning how to market something from a kid's perspective. And I think that could be really interesting. And I feel like perhaps we've even done that before to a degree. But yeah, like I liked this, and it depends on how the season will go. I could see this maybe making its way onto the lower end of season 21 top 5. We'll have to see. But yeah, I think it was just like, it was a pretty good episode, and that's kind of it. It didn't really move me in any way, which is odd to think for an episode that is double the length. I'm not saying that all the double episodes are like these big messages or something. You know, like even Elwood City Turns 100 is not really about like a grander message. It is just sort of a much bigger scale story. But I wouldn't say that's what this is. I don't think much would be lost if you had to, you know, shrink this into 12 minutes instead of 24, which is, I you know, don't mean that to sound harsh. It's just like, there's not all that much going into making it like special. So I liked it, but I think you make some really good points, Lucas. That's as far as I can go with it. Certainly didn't dislike it. And there were some pretty good lines, some creative ideas, and again, I like that George is getting more play. I like that he's being able to have a little bit more personality along with the other characters. But yeah, I think we were saying recently we were hoping for more Francine episodes, and this is certainly one of those. And we've even got one coming up again real soon. So Francine's starting to get a little bit more play after some time on the sidelines. Although when we were talking about this here, I do start to wonder again, where's Arthur? Like, Arthur was nowhere to be seen here. He's certainly not gone, but it's like last time on Elwood City Limits, it was a Binky, and it was all about Binky and Brain. This one is about 4 characters who aren't Arthur. And spoilers, like, the next episode has to do with, like, Francine and Sue Ellen. I'm just like, okay, whose show is this again? Can we just get proof of life on Arthur? Just that he's around. He doesn't have to be like a main character, but just have him as a supporter or something. I'm pretty sure he was in the last one. Sorry, I don't exactly remember off the top of my head, but like, yeah, it's strange that like we're getting around to a lot of the supporting characters, but have to leave Arthur out a little bit. But whatever, it's fine. He'll live. So yeah, The Master Builders. That was the double episode of this season. Much more shortened season. I'm sure we don't have too many double episodes left. So we'll have to see if any more come our way as we make our way through season 21. Of course, as I mentioned, don't forget, at the end of this month, we will have For the Kids, and we'll be talking about Blue's Clues. So if you're not subscribed to our Patreon and you want to hear the full episode, make sure that you do subscribe. There will be a preview on the free feed. But we're not quite there yet. We're still happily going through season 21. Next time, as I alluded to earlier, we're going to be talking about Francine and the Soccer Spy and Sue Ellen and the Last Page. This is another thing of like, if the character is the focus of the episode, their name is in the title. Binky's A Game, Brain and the Time Capsule. A lot of like person and the thing. So that seems to be how season 21 is shaping up so far. And hopefully it can continue some kind of momentum. And hey, it hasn't let us down yet. So I'm perfectly happy about that. And of course, Lucas, I will make it very clear whenever something moves me so much as to go to the theater. And I wish you, the theater enjoyer of the two of us,
yes,
I hope that you have nothing but good experiences there. I know that, a lot of things can dampen the spirit, but you have kept steadfast ever since the COVID-19 restrictions have lifted. You've been back at the theater in full force, and I hope that it continues to be a fruitful experience for you.
And even during COVID, Will, I risked my life to go see Tenet, of all things.
Oh my God.
I watched Tenet with the mask on, and I was like, damn, this is what this movie is? Okay.
Because Daddy Nolan told you to.
Exactly. Yeah, I love the theater. What could I say? And there's again, so many movies. I feel like an embarrassment of riches. It's not often that there's been so many movies I want to go see. I forgot about Mad Max. I got to see that monkey movie, Will.
Which one? There's 2 monkey movies.
Well, the other monkey movie I think is out of theaters now. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. But I have a take I've been brewing, Will.
Ooh.
That and I got to do some rewatches. But I was thinking about this. Is there a long-standing kind of movie franchise with as good of a track record as Planet of the Apes? Because they might, with the exception of the Tim Burton one, they're kind of all good.
Well, I've only seen the first one and the newer ones besides the very latest one.
You got to watch some of those 70s ones, Will.
I think maybe I do.
Nuclear people in the middle of the earth and other crazy stuff like that.
I really, really like the very first one. But like I'm going to give you another take. I kind of think that those newer ape movies are kind of overrated.
Whoa! You heard it here first, folks. I mean, the one with James Franco is like that movie, it has to be taken in the context of its release. I remember seeing that movie in the theater, and it was the most I've ever seen an audience react to kind of a big reveal to movie ever. In my entire movie watching career, the part when the monkey talks, it's the most I've ever seen an audience gasp in unison of all the movies I've ever seen in theaters. So that powerful moment kind of elevates, which is, besides that, a pretty stupid movie. And yeah, I gotta rewatch all the other ones, monkeys on horses and that kind of stuff. It's the monkey magic, Will. It's hard to deny. You take a 3-star movie, you throw a monkey in that ish, and now it's a 4-star movie. I was just looking at pictures of Dunstan Checks In the other day, and I was like, how could this movie be bad? Like, look at the cover of Dunstan Checks In and tell me, oh my god, I'm looking at it right now. I got a big smile on my face. Will. Anyway,
I will admit that I also need to see them again, but I saw those other 2 Ape movies in the theaters, the newer ones, and like, I don't know, both times I was just like, yeah, it's fine. Like, I don't think they're bad or anything. I'm just like, yeah, I don't really get excited about them. Anyway, for those of you who are still braving the theaters, obviously have a great time with whatever you're seeing. You don't have to be like me and wait for things to come onto streaming or whatever. But yeah, always be safe, of course. And thank you, as always, for listening to Elwood City Limits. My name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini,
just look at Potato Go!
We'll see you next time.